Hello, my name is Justin Noel. I'm an authorized Qt instructor from ICS. This video is actually a very small sample of a much larger training course called Qt Essentials. In this video, I'd like to give you some key insights on how to use Qt in your everyday projects, and also demonstrate the type of in-depth training available from the full multi-day Qt Essentials training course. Today we're going to be talking about the Qt MainWindow system, which is a convenience class that allows you to quickly create applications in the standard desktop paradigm. What I mean by that is that most applications on the desktop have a menu bar, toolbar, status bar, and maybe dock windows, as well as an area for the document that you're going to be editing or working on. The MainWindow class is going to help you create all of these very easily. You may have noticed that from the previous videos that Qt makes it very easy to create applications and get them up on the screen. You may have seen a simple hello world, maybe a simple application. You make some widgets, you make some layouts, some signals and slots, you're up and running. The design philosophy of Qt has always been to cut down on the amount of overhead code that you need to write to actually create an application. Under this philosophy, Qt engineers designed the QMainWindow system. And what this is a class that you can derive from that is going to give you the standard desktop look and feel. If you look at this picture here on the right, you'll notice that there are a number of areas to the QMainWindow. At the top and the bottom, there is the menu bar and the status bar. These you'll find in almost every application. Inside of that are the toolbar areas. You can choose to allow the user to have toolbars on the top, bottom, left, or right of the application. Inside of that is areas for dock widgets. You might have some toolboxes that you may allow the user to rip out of your application, drop into your application, or maybe move it around. And then finally, at the very center is the central widget. This is generally the document that you're going to edit, whether it is a text document, if you're something like an Office application, or it might be a bitmap editor if you are something like a Photoshop application. There are a number of support classes that Qt offers to help you populate the QMainWindow. These include the QMenuBar, QToolBars, QDockWidgets, and QStatusBar. Most of these are actually going to be created by the MainWindow, and you can access them with member functions. For an example as to how this will look when you're done, let's have a look at a couple example applications. This here is the application example that comes with Qt. In fact, all of the code I'll be showing you is available in the Qt demo program. Now you'll notice here that this is a very simple application that includes a menu bar, a status bar, and a toolbar. Pretty much things most applications will have. And Qt allows you to go ahead and tear off the menu bar and move it around, or maybe even rip it entirely out of the application. These are all things that your user is just going to expect that your application does, being a desktop application. For a more advanced demo, we'll have a look at the dock widgets example. So in this example, we have two dock windows and a central widget. This letter here that we're writing is actually the document that we're editing. This is the central widget of our application. It happens to be a QText edit. You'll notice that there are dock windows that the user can tear off and drop on their desktop, or they can move it around the screen, and you'll notice that Qt is very helpful in showing the user where this window is going to be dropped. Also, if the user grabs the window and drops a dock window into another dock window, it will automatically tabify the windows. All of this you get essentially for free simply by subclassing QMainWindow. Once again, all things that your user is going to expect that your application just does. Some of you out there might say, well, This looks like an awful lot of functionality. I just want something that looks more like the application, something simple. I just have a menu bar and a status bar. Well, the Qt engineers have been very careful in making classes that are both efficient and featureful. If you do not access the toolbar area or the status bar, none will actually be created. So the QMainWindow is both featureful and efficient. Now that we have the ability to have menu bars and toolbars created for us, the question is, how do we populate these things with things like open a file or save a file, actions that the user is going to want to perform on your document? Well, Qt's answer to that is QAction. QAction is an abstraction. There is no widget behind QAction. It is just a collection of data. And it's data that describes something that your user wants to do. So your user might want to open a file. So here in the example code, we'll see that we make a new QAction, and it has a string called open. So we assume that this action is going to, well, open a document. Now, QAction is going to contain everything necessary to build user interface objects that perform these actions. So QAction has methods to set an icon, to set its text, to set tooltips, status tips, and even set the icon. The most important part of a QAction is that it has a signal called triggered. What triggered is going to do is anytime the user chooses from a user interface element to perform this action, triggered is going to be fired. Once you have created an action, you can then add it to your application in as many places as you'd like. So for example here, we have added the action to both a menu and a toolbar. Anytime the user now clicks on that menu item or that tool button, the action signal triggered is going to be fired. And whatever slot you have hooked up to triggered is going to run. Having these actions has simple data which gets automatically turned into user interface elements is going to be very handy, because now you have one place where you can change the name of an action and it changes everywhere, whether it's on a toolbar, if it's on a menu, or it's on a right-click menu. Change it once, changes everywhere. Likewise, if you should deem an action to be disabled at any time, you call setEnabledFalse on the action, and anywhere that that action appears will become disabled and be unselectable by the user. This is going to make coding your application much easier. So here is a standard menu bar. You can make an instance of this by calling new QMenuBar. But if you're using a main window, all you have to do is use the method MenuBar, and one will be created automatically and a pointer returned to you. The pointers returned from QMainWindow are going to be owned and managed by the QMainWindow class, so you do not have to worry about deleting them. So in this example, we are making a call to MenuBar to get a pointer to the QMainWindow single, there's only one, menu bar in your application, and then adding a menu, here it's called File, and we're using the ampersand syntax. Anytime you put an ampersand in a menu name, that is going to be the keyboard accelerator. So if the user hits Alt F, here it goes ampersand F, the user is going to drop down the file menu. We have the menu bar, and then we go ahead and we add an action to that menu, which is very easy. We take an action that we've already created and simply add it. So you'll see that there is a separation between the actions we create and the menu bar we create. There is no need in Qt to ever make anything like menu bar items. There's no need to create things like right-click menu items. These will be generated for you via the Qt actions. So you see how easy it is to create these actions and add them to menu bars. These actions can also be used in other places in your application simply by accessing their pointers. Generally, you'll want to have a large pool of these actions available and accessible to any class that can access the document that you're editing. One place that's convenient to show these actions are on right-click menus, basically context menus. And you can have the ability to pop up these context menus in a few different ways. First, there is an event. Just like if you wanted to handle a mouse press or a key press, you implement an event. Likewise, QWidget has the context menu event. In here, you will be given a global position at which you can pop up a Q pop-up menu. You can also subscribe to a signal called Custom Context Menu Requested. And effectively, this is called any time that the user right-clicks on the widget. There's an even simpler way in which you can add an action to a Q widget, set a property called Context Menu Policy to Actions Context Menu, and then the widget will automatically create a menu, pop it up, filled with the actions that you have added to that widget. So Qt is going to make it very easy for you to make these context menus. Toolbars are also an easy way to use actions in your application. These are little panels that your users are going to expect they be able to have at the top of their application or tear off or place around the sides or the bottom of the application. Most of the time, the QToolbar is going to be only displaying the icons while the menus display both text and icons. It is very easy to add a toolbar to your QMainWindow. Oftentimes there will be multiple toolbars in your application that the user can move around. The easiest way to add a toolbar to the main window is to call Add Toolbar and give it the name of the toolbar you want to create. We're going to use these names later if we want to programmatically manipulate the toolbars. So here in the code you can see that we call Add Toolbar, which is a function of the QMainWindow, and we add a file toolbar. We add an action, we add a separator, and then we actually add a widget. Here a line edit that has the text find inside of it. So we have some buttons and then an area where the user might be able to search the document. These are all features of QToolbar. Now when using QToolbar, it will automatically create the tool buttons for you. You don't actually have to make instances of the buttons and place them in the toolbar. However, sometimes in your application, you want to have buttons that use actions placed around your application. And you can do this by making specific instances of QToolButton. QToolButtons can also have menus applied to them, so when you click them, you actually get a list of choices to choose from. So here's an example of a QTool button, where we're making an instance of it and then setting an action on the button. Anytime this button is clicked, the action's triggered signal is going to be fired, and any slot that is connected to that action will be fired. So here in the next line of code, we are going ahead and we're setting pop-up mode on the QTool button. What this means is you're going to get a little button with an arrow, so when you click on the button, you're actually going to get a list of choices. And these list of choices are also QActions. So you can see where we're going to be using and reusing these QActions quite a bit. Now another standard user interface concept for desktop applications is the status bar at the bottom of your program. The status bar might give you progress on how much of a document has been printed. It might give you the row and column where the cursor is. It might give you help when you hover over tool buttons. It might give you a status tip telling you what that button does. This can be very easily created with a QMainWindow just by calling the status bar function. The status bar function will return to you a pointer to a QStatusBar. With that pointer, you can choose to say show a message with a function called showMessage, where you might say file saved. Or you might add a widget. You might add a permanent area of the scroll bar, which might show the row and column of the cursor of the document that the user is editing. These are all things that you can do with QStatusBar. QMainWindow is going to make sure that there's only one status bar and it appears at the bottom of the application. By default, there is no status bar, so oftentimes in your constructor, you will make a call to simply status bar, and one will be created then, and your user will see the area blank at the bottom of the screen. Dock widgets, as you have seen in the example, are very powerful. You make these objects called QDock widgets. You can use that dock widget as a parent widget and add as many things to it as you would like. And then you can place that dock widget into any one of the 4 dock areas in the application. There's one at the top, one at the bottom, and there's one on each side. And by creating these dock widgets and placing them in your application, you get all that functionality that I showed you effectively for free. The user can rip off those windows, the user can drag them around, the user can also drag them into each other and create tab stacks of dock widgets. It's very powerful, and these are all things that the user is going to expect that if your application has dockable areas, that the user is able to do. Makes a very professional looking application very quickly. You'll see here in the example that we are making a new dock widget, and we are populating that dock widget with a QList widget. There are a number of properties that you can set in your dock widget to allow your user help in where to place the window. Sometimes dock widgets are only really useful if they are on the top. If you have a very thin lawn widget, you would only want to allow the user to place that at the top or the bottom. And if you had a lawn thin dock widget, maybe you might want to say that's only really available to dock on the left or the right. You can do this with a method on the dock widget called setAllowedAreas, and it's an enum that you can OR together. So if you only want it on the left and the right, you can OR those 2 values together. So once you've created a dock widget and you've set appropriate properties, you can then add it to your main window in a default position. Here, we are making a call to the QMainWindow, and we're saying add dock widget, and we're going to add it to the left side of the application, which in this example happens to be the only place that the user is going to be allowed to drop that dock widget into. So the Qt MainWindow system has a very large API, and here on the slide is sort of a list of some of the things that you can expect. And we've used actually all of these functions in these slides so far. So you might have a call in your constructor, you'll make your menu bars, you'll make your status bars, and you'll set a central widget. Now, and those are things from QMainWindow. Every widget has the ability to have a context menu applied to it, and you can add actions to any widget in your application. Using these QActions, you're going to have lots of these, one for each action your user is going to want to perform, and you can take those actions, you can add them to menu bars, toolbars, and status bars. Using QMainWindow, you can very easily create applications in a desktop paradigm. And I hope I've conveyed to you enough information where you can use this in your own applications. I hope you've enjoyed this sample of the Qt Essentials training course. For the full experience, including labs, a live instructor, and much more, I suggest you attend a full multi-day Qt Essentials training course taught by either ICS or any of the Qt training partners. For further information, please visit qt.nokia.com. Thanks for watching.